This is your host, Jane Hales, and welcome to today's episode of .Team Talks, a podcast all about driving transformative growth through innovative and everyday automation solutions. Let's dive in and start to tame your tech today. We explore the power of process and the joy of curiosity, how embracing the journey leads to growth, creativity, and unexpected discoveries. Get ready for insightful conversation that will challenge the way you think and inspire new perspectives, including the ProfOps perspective.
Fantastic. I am super excited. Rachel and I have known each other for many years. We even lived together decades ago. I'm pleased to see how well she's done and actually how parallel our lives have been, even though we've not actually seen a huge amount of each other during this time. So I'm delighted to see her achievements. What is amazing, I love this as your CV. Rubber, packaging, lingerie, die-cast, digital marketing, gaming, SaaS, and owner. We said rubber and lingerie in the same sentence. Clearly an interesting career. Rachel Swann, thank you so much. Welcome. So cool. Where do we start? Troubleshooter.
What got me there was the really, I think, in the first instance. So the languages, and society expected me to go into teaching, not my parents, but society. So I very metaphorically and ended up doing a postgrad in Edinburgh, which was taking language degrees, language graduates into something, even though languages are useful. And it was export sales and marketing. And I was 10 years, whether that was rubber, lingerie, steel, packaging, all the rest of it, essentially doing export sales and marketing. So that meant a lot of it we were selling on value. We weren't selling on the product itself necessarily, because selling to France, it's got to have a value in it rather than just a price. You know, why would they buy from the UK rather than France, that kind of thing. And quite quickly realised that the principles, and it's going to be one of my career, which is what value for the end user in their own terms. So what does success might be? I've got a piece of packaging that's differentiating my bottle of pearl on the shelf, or it could be actually I've got a bra that finally fits me for the first time. And then the process is asking a lot of questions, actively listening. So I'd done about 9-10 years of export sales and marketing, and ended up in a steel foundry, as you do, working directly for the experience, 1,200 people, and essentially a bit of a one-man, because the chairman was in control of absolutely everything. And he asked me to get involved, but then going around to the factories and looking at the commercial troubleshooting. So, you know, with every order, you always have to, whether it's software, rubber, steel, whatever, you have to think, not only have I made the sale and actually deliver it, and it's that prep into something may go, and 99 times out of 100, it's not that it goes wrong, it's how you address that and what you do about it, and that builds then that relationship, particularly for ongoing sales. So I remember very vividly, asked to go and sort out a couple of projects. One of them was the Natural History Museum, the Darwin building, which was new at the time in the early 2000s, that big glass extension. And the glass is held up with stainless steel, well, in fact, they're not stainless, but steel glazing spiders. And there are a few issues around that. And, you know, the questions you're asking about what's up with the glazing spiders is exactly the same question you ask if a piece of software has gone wrong, which is, well, what did you expect? Why did you expect that? Why is it not doing what you expect? So it's those open questions. So yeah, that was kind of the basic entry into it. And then it's been kind of that standard backbone of the career the last 30 years. So there's the active questions, the active listening, which obviously I'm going to do a lot of talking today, but it's listening, which is important. And then going back in kind of that cyclical reiterative piece, which is, okay, you've asked the question, you've heard an answer. So what? There's a brilliant lady called Sarah Brummett who I did some training with about 10, 15 years ago, primarily around sales training. She said in those days when you'd walk out of the house with your keys and your wallet and your phone, well, of course, nowadays, you only just need your phone, don't you? You know. But she said, in addition to that, you need a couple of decent questions. And if you've got those, then you're prepped for life, pretty much. And one of those questions is always, what does success look like? Why? And so what? And that so what is, how do you quantify that in that person's own language? And if one more person tells me it's ROI, I might just scream. Because I don't know if you've ever met anybody who actually knows what ROI means. And I don't just mean return on investment. Yeah. So do they know what that investment actually entails? Are they taking fixed costs? Are they taking variable costs? Are they taking their own time and effort? What it means, return on investment means a positive outcome in their own language. And I had one client who actually said, it means I can just spend all my marketing budget this financial year, because that means I get marketing budget next year and I know what I want to do with it next year. Whereas if I don't spend it this year, they're not going to give me the full amount next year and I can't allocate it. And that for them was what success meant. I was very happy to help them out with that one, by the way. Very happy. So, and deliver value, obviously. But,
I'm not surprised. Yeah. Well, so in all of your troubleshooting going around the steel factory, or maybe other places as well, what have been the most common themes? What are the most frequent things that you see kind of being the issue?
Really good question. Over 30 years and a range, 30 years, and a range of different verticals. I think it's particularly from a sales and a revenue point of view, it's procrastination, not having courage. So I've always said there are three things. I discovered these relatively late on, maybe about 15 years ago, 20 years ago, but there are three things that I think you need, certainly in the commercial side of things, to be successful in business. And one of them is curiosity. One of them is courage. And one of them was coachability. This kind of goes back to the consultative sales piece. So the curiosity, keep asking questions. There's a really common theme in that we're all experts in something, essentially ourselves. That's the only thing we're actually experts in. We may have significant expertise in a particular area or technology, but you know what? There's going to be somebody else who knows something slightly different to us, or things move on, whether it's external factors, whether it's bananas. So whether it's external factors or whether it's something internal, something will always change. So keep asking those questions. The minute you start assuming, my dad used to always say, the minute you assume, you make an ass of you and me. But it's right, because the minute you assume, you're removing power from the person that you're talking to, so you're no longer having a conversation of equals. Yeah. And if somebody's going to buy from you, they actually want to buy from an equal, or maybe somebody who is who knows what they're doing, but equally who listens, because we all want to feel heard. Then there's that courage, and it keeps up to date. The courage to ask the questions you might not necessarily want to hear the answers to. Anybody in a commercial role, I can guarantee, has pursued those sales opportunities where you in your heart of hearts know it's not actually going to close, right? You know that, but you like them. You're having a nice chat with them, and there's a possibility. And if it were to close, you might hit target, you might exceed target, or there's some other kind of potential benefit. But actually having the courage to ask those questions and saying, is this actually going to happen? Is it going to happen in this time scale? Allows a lot more of an open conversation, and allows you to stop spending so much time and effort on things where, frankly, your time and effort would be better spent elsewhere. And then there's the and also to take you out of your comfort zone. The minute you feel comfortable in something, potentially is the minute that you kind of should go, I should be doing something else. Because if we're comfortable, we start assuming, we start losing that curiosity. Yeah. So there's a bit around pushing. And then coachability is the third bit. And that means you need to be coachable in that, constantly learning. As going back to, I'm an expert in myself, but actually I don't really know myself particularly well, I'd guess. But there's that learning, constantly learning. But also you need then, particularly in a consultative piece, whether that's a consultative sales or whether you're engaging with other people from a process point of view, you need to be able to coach them without it being condescending. Yeah, because that's where you're going to bring the value. And that might be coaching somebody in a finance role around how they can influence a decision and get the CFO to actually sign something else off, for example. Or it might be somebody who desperately wants the solution that you're giving them, definitely wants the process, but there's somebody else that needs to sign it off who doesn't necessarily understand the value, doesn't necessarily quantify it in the same way. So it's about making sure that you're really understanding the end benefit in their own words, which I always go back to, in their own language, their own terminology, their own vernacular, and helping them articulate it. And it doesn't matter what you think about that, but underneath all of that, there's got to be your own values. But underneath all that, your own values.
Interesting. Right, there's a number of really interesting things there. And one of the things I noticed is the power of three in the way that you communicate. And particularly, you mentioned the three
Courage,
curiosity,
coachability.
courage, and coachability. Look, I've remembered them by you doing that, so you've done a good job there. You also mentioned the word process in relation to that. So for you, is the process the way that you communicate, or is it the way that you execute? Well, tell me more about why you use that phrase.
I love process for two reasons. It helps you do things and without having to reinvent the wheel. So for most things, there will be a process. So your energy goes into where your actual skill set is. So why start reinventing the wheel when actually your education, your experience, your expertise lies elsewhere? So my expertise is not necessarily in creating processes, right? My expertise is in asking questions and helping people kind of develop solutions, that kind of thing. So having something there that I can follow, that it takes me through to the next step of what I need to do, is invaluable. It means I don't have to spend time, energy and effort. Think about that. So it makes me significantly more effective, I think, and gives better outcomes for my client and the customer base. The other thing about process, though, is I love it because you can then circumvent it, which may not be what you want to hear. But they then become the exception. If you're circumventing a process, why are you circumventing it? And this goes back to the commercial troubleshooting. Are you then potentially setting yourself up to fail, and shooting yourself in the foot? In which case, then it's quite easy to see where that started to go wrong. Or are you actually improving a process because there's extraneous steps in there? And things around, for example, process of raising an invoice. I mean, I remember in one of my first jobs, it had to go between about 3 or 4 different departments for no other reason than that's what they'd always done. And you're looking and you're kind of going, but why? And if it were to go here, and do it the other way and rule out one person, and the view was if it ruled out Pauline, she was going to be not very happy. And I said, can I ask her? So I said, Pauline, if we don't include you at this stage, but include you at the next stage, she went, I'd be bloody delighted. And it was in South Wales. She said, I'd be bloody delighted. So because I get sick and tired and it takes up so much of my time. So I just thought it was something I had to do. You're like, oh, okay. So we circumvented it. And you can do that either regularly, in which case you're then improving the process, in which case you're again becoming more effective and more efficient and not wasting time, or you do it occasionally, in which case it means that the rule is right 90% of the time or whatever, and just occasionally that process isn't quite fit for that purpose.
Interesting. Because I've seen stats out there to say that businesses will generally change their strategy, not so much the vision, but the strategy to achieve the vision once every 18 months or so. But their processes, they only typically review once every 4 years. So there's a lot of companies out there that are working on the old, like that example you've just used with the lady. Well, that's the way we've always done it. And it's getting the invoice out.
But that's really interesting, because if you're changing your strategy every 18 months, there's a question then as to why you're changing strategy. So is it actual overall strategy, or is it execution of that strategy? And either of those are going to have some kind of impact though on the process, because your outcome is probably going to be different. Even if it's slightly different, then all your processes should be geared towards the overall bigger mission and the bigger, which is going to be part of the strategic direction, in my experience. So that's a really interesting stat.
And it was a bit of an eye-opener for me when I saw that. It's so detached. Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
The swan and the feet, and why the kick is so hard. Yeah, interesting. Now, I'm coming back, you being a language student, your use of language is fantastic, and you have some fantastic idioms which you've already brought to the table so far. We were chatting in a previous conversation where you had a majestic quote about cash, didn't you?
See, one of the reasons I'm so great is I've learned this the hard way. So cash is king and cash flow is queen. And essentially you need a joint monarchy at the head of your business. And is that it goes back to that age-old adage of turnover is vanity, profit is sanity. But it's cash and cash flow. It's all very well ostensibly being profitable on paper, but if you haven't got money in the bank in order to be able to pay salaries or to pay your creditors or to pay your partners in particular, then you don't essentially have a business. And it's being able to plan, I mean, sometimes even down to the hour, but certainly down to the day and the week. And having those things, so you could be invoicing several £100,000, But if you're not getting that until 6 months after you've done the work, how are you actually going to do the work? How are you going to pay the salaries? How are you going to motivate people? How are you going to build and buy the tech stack? How are you going to get it working? And that again comes back to the mutual benefit piece. So, in sales and marketing, it isn't about foisting something onto somebody. So, like double glazing, I'm going to make you buy new windows when you don't actually need them. That's the age-old, stereotype. In consultative sales and in consultative sales and marketing, it's about providing mutual benefit. So you are providing a solution that adds significant value that's quantified by that end user. And in return, you are getting payment for that, you're getting remuneration. But equally, if you can't deliver it because they're not paying you until it's late, or you've delivered it, for example, then they're not going to get that benefit. So again, it's having the courage to have those conversations around, if we were to, for example, charge 25% up front, or charge, with software, it's about 100% up front because it's 12-month subscription quite often. But if we were to charge X up front and then performance related parts or just payment afterwards, what impact would that have on you? Because it would have a massively positive impact on us. So that's where, if you have cash flow, you can change the balance of relationships with clients, partners, suppliers, and having cash in the bank means then you've actually got a bit of a breather as well. So yeah.
Indeed. And that makes me think the phrase that you've just said, where revenue
is sanity,
vanity, profit is sanity. So why do we call it RevOps? Or chief revenue operator? Why do we not call it?
There you go.
Chief profit operator.
Yeah, that's. I think you just coined a brand new term there. I think that's amazing because it profits. Yeah, because essentially, if you are in a business, you are there to make profit, and you're making profit to either pay your shareholders and pay your employees, whatever that is. If you're not there to make profit, then that's absolutely fine. You're there as a business for good, but you still need to be having some kind of income in order to be able to execute the good that you're doing. So profit, I think, sometimes is seen as a bit of a dirty word. Don't get me wrong. Look, I've got twin boys who are both left wing. One of them thinks our current government is far too right wing. I mean, go figure. Capitalism is at the basis of our economy, and we are all there to make money because money is currently what's making the world go around. But it's about doing it with ethically and morally, with your values. And maybe this is the whole thing around courage. We need to talk about, actually, we're doing this to make a profit. We're not doing it so I can drive off into the sunset into a Ferrari, not least because I can't get in and out of the bloody things. But but it's about we're doing this to pay our shareholders, pay salary, and what do we then do with the profit is an entirely different conversation. Yeah, if we're not profitable, why exist?
Good point. And on that sobering thought, I'd like to come back slightly to comparisons you're making between, shall we say, more traditional industries and the way that you've gone about consultative sales and the RevOps and the SaaS industries that you've worked in. What kind of differences have you noticed between, in effect, selling both of those industries?
Oh, really good question. There's more similarities really than differences. The processes are the same. It's that questioning. It's the what's in it for them, the active listening. So ask a question and then don't assume you know the answer. In self-serve SaaS, those questions, you don't get necessarily to ask this question. So in high volume SaaS, for example, you get that from the stats, the analytics, the reporting. But then it's the questions around, okay, well, why in the conversion cycle, why are we getting drop off here and why are we getting churn here and that kind of thing. So again, it's asking questions, but maybe not of the end user. And actually, there's a really interesting point around end user engagement. Far too often, as businesses and organizations, we ask people for feedback without, for again, a minute thinking about what's in it for them. Why on earth would they give us feedback? It's like when you go to a hotel and you come back and there's already a how was your check-in, or please give us some feedback. Why would I bother? Because I'm in the industry, I do often give feedback, positive and some negative. But why would I? So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're only going to get either really bad feedback or excellent feedback. You're not going to get the middle, which is where you can make the improvements. But in terms of the other similarities, I think it's a lot. I tell you what, actually, one massive similarity is in pretty much every single vertical I've worked in, whether that's manufacturing and rubber, packaging, steel, or whether it's software and tech and engagement, gamification, that kind of thing. The competition for you as a business rarely comes from somebody else doing the same thing. Most of the time, and this might be unique to kind of my career, most of the time it's coming from us doing nothing or spending the money elsewhere. Now, the only time that wasn't necessarily the case was in steel foundries, in that if you're doing turbine casings, you have to buy a turbine casing. You have no choice. But if you're looking at buying software, then do you necessarily have to have that solution? Could you actually spend your money on other processes, other operations? So that again comes back to processes. So you might find that people are cobbling together 3 or 4 different solutions because they understand that part of it, and they don't necessarily understand how the two will go together, but they know it's cheaper. So they're going on price, not on value. Or actually going back to Pauline and accounting, or why I've always done it like that. Why would I do it this? Why would I do it this way or a different way? Because I've always done it like that. So why would I therefore spend money on doing something different? So there's a bit of a fear there. So that competition is not necessarily another business who looks like you, or maybe based in the States, or has 27 more features than you do. Is most of the time probably going to be somebody going, I just don't see the value in it. I'll just not do anything, or I'll spend my money on advertising instead of SEO, or I'll spend it on I don't know, print advertising, bananas. Print advertising.
So in other parts of your life, you're clearly leading the way in terms of governance and in terms of MATs, so multi-academy trusts and things like that. And I know you and I are not educationalists, but we get involved with that side of being trustees and governors. How, again, what is the similarities in terms of what you do in your commercial life compared to what you have to work?
Yeah, so the extracurricular, it's the middle-aged, middle-class meddling mother piece, which I personify, according to my sons, who are not now called Kevin and Perry, not their real names. I think similarities, again, are the questioning. So you're going in, whether that's in the governance as a governor in a multi-academy trust secondary school, or whether it's going into the committee of the rugby club, or the football parent voice, or what else have I done? I mean, chair of the scout group, my view was always, if the boys were doing something extracurricular, I wouldn't be able to help on a regular basis in the week. But if there was something I could bring to the table which helped and add value, then I kind of felt it incumbent on me to kind of contribute. And people generally quite enjoyed it, I think. But in terms, again, it goes back to that questioning. Don't go in and assume you know everything. But again, you're going in with a fresh perspective. So there's not been really any consistent verticals across my career. And likewise, there aren't many similarities in governance of a school versus being on a football club committee. But it's asking those questions of the whys, the hows, the whats and the reallys, and that's being similar. So I've always said that actually you don't necessarily need to have expertise in that particular vertical that you're working in, as long as you've got the courage and curiosity to ask those questions. And it's the same thing in governance. So, you must find this as a trustee as well.
Well, I find your response very reassuring, because I walked in there and went, what? Why? And so I've missed something. And it turned into a very interesting experience. But also what amazes me is that we kind of need more people like you doing those voluntary roles, because the multi-academy trust model needs, it's run by volunteers. The most senior roles are people that aren't getting paid for it because they don't want to be bribed, to stop the situation of being bribed. But you've got to have nous about you. You've got to have confidence. And I would encourage people to step up and try, because there is training. But
you're absolutely right. And it is that legal responsibility, which can be quite daunting, not least because Ofsted hold us to account. And, as I said, I'm middle-aged, middle-class meddling mother. That's my sole kind of qualification, if you like. And all of a sudden, I'm being held accountable for whether these professionals who've got significant training, background and education, and let's face it, they've got one of the most important jobs in the world, which is educating our children, the next generation. We're putting so much pressure on those children to sort out the mess that we've inherited and we're exacerbating. So we need these professionals to be doing the best job ever. And here you go, you've got a bunch of amateurs with varying skill sets coming in and going, oh yeah, we think you're doing a good job. Or actually, we don't say we think you're doing a good job. What we do is we say to us, prove to us why you believe you're doing a good job and how you're doing it. What could you be doing better? That continual improvement, which then we can turn around to Ofsted and say, well, this is what they're telling us they're doing, and this is what we think is working, and this is what the evidence we're seeing. And Ofsted do need more people in, because the impact you can have as a constructive challenge. It's that critical friend. I know it's an overused piece, but it is constructive challenge, constructive support, with emphasis on the constructive bit. It's huge, absolutely huge. It's not going again, you're doing it all wrong. It's saying, okay, why are you doing this? There's another bit, there's a slight aside on this, which is, for a long time, I used to say to boys that if you talk about they, you immediately depersonalize somebody. So I am yet to meet, I think, in 30 odd years of work, not too many people. I've met one or two, but I've yet to meet too many people who are intentionally malicious, right? Who are doing something because they think they know best and they know it's going to cause harm or detriment to somebody. Even with the people I've disagreed with most, whether that's from a political point of view personally, or whether it's in a work environment or under a school environment, or something's happened. These people have not acted out of malice or any malintent. These people are doing something because they fundamentally believe, because the reasons and logic behind it, that this was the right thing to do at that time. And the minute you start saying they, you lose that relation to humanity. You lose that relationship to somebody actually making an informed decision. Now, sometimes it may just be an knee-jerk reaction, which again is fine. And again, you can kind of talk through that. But as soon as you start saying they become faceless. And the intent and the maliciousness of the intent, whether it's mendacity or whether it's somebody acting poorly, starts coming bigger than the actual act itself. And that, I think, transcends work, non-work. And then the final bit around this, I also have a final phrase, which I will stop in a minute, which is, I hate the term work-life balance. Because I think if you're going to have anything balanced, it should be life-work balance. But I fundamentally believe it's life balance. And that's because work is an intrinsic part of what most of us do. Yeah. So therefore it's life balance. And that then goes on. That's why there are so many similarities in the non-work, so the non-paid piece, if you like, versus the voluntary extracurricular stuff, as well as the actual paid bit. And all of that, I think, contributes to the whole. That makes me who I am, for good or bad. And I think that contributes to society generally.
Yeah, I think you're right. Thank you. So that leads us nicely into, so what next, Rachel? So you are in a very exciting stage.
So I really enjoy working across a range of different businesses. And what I've found, so I'm working at the moment as a fractional chief revenue officer, essentially, in my own advisory business. So I've gone limited, which is, a big step. But one of the boys has done me an amazing logo, although he does still owe me a website, but we'll leave that one there. Schoolgirl error of paying him up front. There's the piece around, I really enjoy working in SaaS and tech, so software as a service and technology, particularly around startups, but also those businesses that are beyond startups are scaling. And going back to your piece around businesses change strategy every 18 months or so, what's really noticeable is that in the early stages of a business, they will often pivot. So what they started out as doing, the core product or proposition may be the same, but the messaging around it may be different, or the vertical they're going into, or the actual use case is different. And I'm really enjoying that. I'm helping businesses with everything from their proposition all the way through the funnel pipeline, converting it. And also if they're already generating revenue, which most of them are, helping them retain those customers and clients and building, ongoing growth there. Because it's much harder, the stats better than I do, but it's much harder to acquire customers than it is to maintain them and grow. And again, that comes down to mutual benefit. So I hate the term account management. I think it's passive and reactive. I'd much rather call it client development. And you can say that to the client as well. We're looking to develop you, but that's joint development. So again, it's that having that adult relationship with peers. So that's where I'm at the moment, working with some really exciting businesses, almost exclusively in tech or SaaS or services to tech and SaaS. And some of that is around a bit of a board advisory or help them in terms of strategy. One lovely business I'm working with, they've decided where they're looking to grow to and what that means in terms of what their success is and how they're going to measure it. So I've got some lovely pieces from them in terms of what their ideal day looks like. But then other businesses, it's much more around the actual revenue. But if your ideal day and your exit looks like X, how are you going to get there? Again, it's a process. You've got a process to do it. And a lot of that's going to be driven by revenue. So let's help in terms of that. And again, making sure you're focusing on what's in it for them, for the end user in their own language, all that kind of thing. So it's quite exciting, really.
Brilliant.
It's quite exciting, really.
Brilliant, lovely. And so
I'm on LinkedIn. There's a photograph of me, in fact, probably wearing blue, because I tend to wear a lot of blue, with his grey hair and having a glass of wine. That's my profile photo. There are a couple of Rachel Swanns. I'm not the Chief Constable of Derbyshire. I quite often get, your profile has been viewed and it's so-and-so from Hertfordshire Police, and I think, God, they're going to be very disappointed, bless them. LinkedIn is probably the best way to find me, until one of my sons has done my website. But there's also a couple of other Rachel Swanns, but I'm the one with the grey hair, big bird with the added extra, because it's Swan with two ends. So Swan with two ends.
Thanks. Yeah.
Lovely. And we'll put the link below anyway later on when we get that. So super. Thank you.
Cool. So thank you for joining us for this episode of Team Talks today. We hope you found that aha moment to help you on your journey towards automation and business growth. Don't forget to subscribe in the link below and tune in next time where we'll explore. Until then, remember to tame your tech and keep pushing those boundaries.